second step, putting in your probe holder. Keep in mind that you don't want to do this if you're going to be too close. So for example, if you feel like you might hit here, you can use this motor to raise it up a little bit and then put it in. There's no harm in doing that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's always better to be cautious. For one, you don't want to break probes because they cost money. For two, you don't want to potentially damage your sample. For three, it wastes time.
Yeah.
Is there a sample holder?
Pardon? Circular section here with cutouts.
Yes.
So that's the sample holder. So the sample just magnetizes onto it. So if I go ahead and I pick this up, and so if I go ahead and put this down, you can see that it gets magnetized and sticks. And so that's the purpose of those metal discs that I showed you before. Whatever kind of substrate you're using, whether it's glass, mica, silicon wafer, you just stick that onto the metal disc, and then this will allow it to be firmly held in place so that it's not able to move while scanning. Additionally, you can kind of use those slots to be able to kind of move it around. Ideally, you want it to be relatively set up straight. However, that only really applies to this sample. Just because obviously once you're using your own samples, it might not matter if there's a kind of straight up and down structure or if it's just going to be kind of random dispersion across the surface. So once you have your sample inserted, you'll make your adjustments, get it, or using these to get above wherever you want to scan for your area of interest. Then you'll take your probe holder, go ahead and you'll insert it. And then the next step is you're going to want to use this black screw that sticks up to adjust your focus. You want to focus on your cantilever. After focusing on your cantilever, you'll want to make sure that you set your laser spot correctly. Like I said, this is typically one of the more difficult parts, especially, for example, if the laser spot's here and you try and do this, you see that there's not really an indicator that you're passing over. So typically what I recommend doing if you're struggling to find the laser spot is if you use this back one, or if you use this top one, you can continue to move it back until you see that laser spot appear here. Once you see it appear here, you'd be able to use this to kind of maneuver. You'll be able to use this to kind of maneuver in line with your cantilever, and just use the top one again to walk it out to about that base of the triangle. Once you've set up your laser position as such, then we're able to go ahead and go down and focus on our sample. And now we have to adjust our photodetector. So the reason why we have to adjust our photodetector is essentially our cantilever is held in a constant position. And so as the laser comes in, bounces off the mirror and hits the back of the cantilever, there's no way to kind of automatically tell the laser where to go. It's going to be random. So you have to move the photodetector into the path of the laser.
Okay.
So there are two different ways to be able to do this. The first is what we call course adjustment, and that is physically grabbing this photodetector and pushing it in and out of its mount. You see, I can push it in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the laser signal, you'll see that it changes as I go. So as I go all the way here, you'll see that our top minus bottom, our left minus right, and our top plus bottom are all low. As I push it in, I want you guys to pay attention to the top plus bottom. What the top plus bottom is it's a measure of the total saturation. So the total amount of laser that's hitting. What you want to do first is push this in until you maximize your top plus bottom. So like I said, you'll notice that the value will increase. 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7. Once you reach your maximum, this is going to be cantilever dependent, both in if it's reflective, if it's the ones that we provide, or if it's dirty. As it's dirty, or as it gets dirty, it will kind of be less reflective. So you just want to continue to push it in until you reach that maximum. Once you reach that maximum, what you'll notice is it will trace up and down. So if I push in and pull slightly, see that the laser spot's kind of just moving up and down. So you want to set it at about the 0 point. So like that, roughly. So you don't want it to be too far up like this. You don't want it to be too far down like that. You want to set it towards about the middle, like that. So once you've maximized your top plus bottom value here, then you're able to use these knobs in order to set the position correctly. The knob facing out will adjust your left minus right signal, and the knob on the top will adjust your top minus bottom signal. So if I go ahead and turn this, notice that my left minus right is changing. And so we just want to set that near 0. It does not have to be perfectly on 0, but it just needs to be close to 0. Like that. Then from here, I can go ahead and use the top knob, and I can set my top minus bottom. Your top minus bottom should be between 0.5 and 0.8. Sorry, 0.5 to 0.9.
Okay.
The reasoning for that is this is just where we found you get the best overall resolution. Additionally, it's creating a slight top bias for where that laser light is hitting. So it's only splitting between 2 quadrants rather than 4 quadrants. So there's less overall kind of laser light that's being scattered. And like I said, these parameters that I'm giving you for laser alignment and everything else will be in those updated instructional videos. So it will tell you, like, push in and pull out this to maximize this, get this near 0, get this between 0.5 and 0.9.
So our automatic choice should be between 0.5 and 0.9.
For the top minus bottom, yes.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if it's 0.5 or 0.9. It will differ a little bit. Well, it won't differ necessarily. In non-vibrating mode, like what we're in right now, your set point is going to be dependent on top minus bottom. So anytime you're doing non-vibrating mode testing, you should always set your top minus bottom to pretty much like kind of the same value to get an apples to apples comparison. So if you're taking scans and your top minus bottom is 0.9, then in the future I would recommend continuing to set it to 0.9. If you're doing vibrating mode, it doesn't matter because it's completely unrelated. But in this case, I'll just set it to a little bit above 0.5. Alright, so now we have our sample in, we have our probe holder in, we have our laser on our cantilever, and we also have our photodetector aligned. So now, what we get to go ahead and do is we get to move on to the system tab here. Now you'll notice this scanner option. So with this, you'll have your TS50-17. This is just your standard AFM scanning. And below that, you'll have your TS-DNS. This is for your liquid cell. So this is because each of them have different piezos for that Z motion. They have slightly different calibration values, so we figured that it would be best to have two different system tabs for that. So if you're doing normal scanning with this probe holder, you'll keep it on the 50-17. In the future, whenever you start using that Duncan Scan probe holder, then you'll use that TS DNS. Below that, you'll notice this range check button. If I click this, you'll see that that cantilever is moving in its square pattern. And this also shows kind of a rough generalization of where exactly you're going to scan. So it's using it to push the piezos to their maximum. So if I do this, we'll roughly be taking a scan within this area. Keep in mind that it does look larger because you are above the surface, so it's going to make it look like you're going to scan a lot more than you are. I guess I skipped over this. At the very top right, this is where you have your scan mode. So this is where you can switch between vibrating and non-vibrating mode. Today we're going to be going over vibrating mode. And then we'll see how far we get, and we might have a little bit of time to either go over noise floor or non-vibrating mode. I guess continuing to backtrack, we have resolution. So this is going to adjust the overall kind of resolution of your scanning. In that it will limit your overall XY range as well as your Z range. So like with most AFMs, the smaller the scan area, typically the better your results are going to be. You're going to get less noise in a 1 micron by 1 micron scan than you will in a 50 by 50 micron scan. There's just less motion, so there's less potential for noise to interfere. Obviously that comes with caveats and drawbacks. Sometimes you need to scan something that's bigger than a micron. So this is where you'll be able to kind of adjust, and for example, the default is 50 by 50 by 17, so this is your full resolution size. Then there's a higher option, which is 33.3 by 33.3 by 11.3. There's the highest, which is 16.7 by 16.7 by 5.7, and then there's a custom. And then if you click this gear, this gives you access to change all of these values. I do recommend leaving the high, higher, and highest alone, and only adjusting the custom. In order to adjust the overall scan range, you see that right now it's set to a XY high voltage of 14. So this correlates to this 23.3. And this Z high voltage is set to 7, which correlates to its 7.9. So for example, if I go ahead and set this to like 6, and this to like 4, and click apply, you'll notice that now we're scanning a 10 by 10 with a Z range of 4.5. And so you can kind of play around with these, and this will set your overall maximum. Keep in mind that you can still kind of infinitely zoom after this. So you can take that 10 by 10 and you can scan a zoomed in 1 by 1 or 0.5 by 0.5. So you can continue to kind of zoom in. This just kind of sets the overall maximum. The smaller those maximum values are, typically the better the noise. In this case, while testing, we're just going to go with a 50 by 50. Also, anytime you change any of these, even if you're not switching between them, so if you change these values, it does require that you do a range check again. That's just because you're changing, or you're potentially changing the voltage values, And so, in case that something is changed with the AFM, it does need to do that range check again just to make sure that everything is still operational. Moving on, we will come back to test probe alignment. This is done after you've tuned your frequency. So moving on to tune frequency, you'll notice several parameters that can be changed here. We'll start with the lower selected upper steps and demodulation gain. So if you look at the label that's on a box of probes, you'll see that we have information on the coating, the cantilever's length, width, thickness, frequency, and spring constant K. In this case, we're looking at the frequency. That says 130 to 250 kilohertz. So for the lower bound, we'll put in 130. For the upper bound, we'll put in 250. The selected value does not matter so long as it is within that range. So for example, you can't have a selected value of 300 because it's outside of the range. Steps can stay at 100. This is just how many data points will be taken between the lower and upper bounds. And then the demodulation gain can stay at 4 dB. So don't adjust the demodulation gain. Also, you have your amplitude and phase sliders, and I'll explain these after we take a frequency tune. And so we're getting a blue line and a red line. The blue line denotes the amplitude of vibration, how much that cantilever is actually vibrating. And the red line denotes the phase shift. So this is for taking those phase shift measurements that I mentioned before, where you're able to look at kind of composition of surfaces. You're also able to get rid of either of these at any time. I recommend never getting rid of amplitude, but you can't get rid of the phase, and it will make the overall look of it a lot more visually easy to see. So you see that now that we've taken our amplitude or our tune frequency, you see that we have this one peak right here. So this is our resonant peak. So we'll want to go over to this vertical blue bar. We'll want to click on it and drag it over the peak. Then from here you can go over to the left and click this green bar. You can start to drag it in. And what you'll notice is as I drag that bar, that's adjusting my lower bound. So we just want to get it kind of close to that peak. Then we'll want to go over to the right side, click on that red bar, and do that same kind of thing. So we want to make sure that we're able to see this entire peak. Once we do that, we can go ahead and click Start Frequency Tune again. And now that we've found our peak, we're going to take a much nicer kind of resonant peak of it, like so. And then once again, like before, go ahead and adjust and zoom in a little bit more. So once you get to about this point, you'll see that we have kind of a nice peak forming. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to take this blue indicator, wherever the kind of peak is, you want to set it slightly to the left. The reasoning for this is